A chill wind seems to whisper through these digital trees, doesn't it? Like a melody of dread played on some unseen flute. If you're a gamer, the name Lost Woods probably sends a shiver down your spine. It's that instant, gut feeling, a primal recognition of a place where the path forward is a lie, and every rustle of leaves could be your own sanity starting to fray. It's a place where childhood wonder sours into something sinister, where playful imps hide a horrifying secret, and where even brave adults can be reduced to hollow, rattling bones. We've all felt it, haven't we? That rising panic as the screen fades, only to dump us, defeated, right back at the forest's mocking entrance. But what if this pixelated purgatory is more than just clever game design? What if the curse that binds the Lost Woods, the one that ensures no one escapes alive, or at least unchanged, has roots stretching far deeper into the fertile shadowed soil of our own world's oldest fears and darkest stories? What if the Lost Woods is actually a mirror, reflecting terrors that have haunted humanity since we first huddled around fires, peering nervously into the impenetrable darkness of the forests that surrounded us? So join me. Today, we're venturing not just into the coded corridors of Hyrule's most infamous labyrinth, but into the very heart of ancient folklore and mythology. We're here to uncover the terrifying real-world inspirations that breathe such potent life and death into the Lost Woods. This is an investigation into a curse that reaches beyond the screen, a journey to understand why these digital woods feel so profoundly, unsettlingly real, and why, for millennia, storytellers have warned us, do not stray from the path. Because in these forests, both real and imagined, something ancient waits, and it does not wish you well. The tales are clear. Enter, and you may never truly leave. What's the first thing that hits you about the Lost Woods and the Legend of Zelda? It's that cruel, cyclical nature. Take one wrong turn, and boom, you're magically zapped right back to the start, the same scenery mocking your failed attempt. It's a perfect interactive nightmare of being utterly, hopelessly lost. Now, this isn't just frustrating game design. It's tapping into a fundamental human anxiety, that sheer terror of disorientation, of the familiar world dissolving into an endless, repeating horror show. Just imagine, for a second, being truly lost. I don't mean missed a turn on the highway lost. I mean deep wilderness, no idea where you are lost. The sun dips below the canopy, and the world plunges into a disorienting twilight. Every tree suddenly looks the same. Every tiny sound is amplified, maybe even distorted. Your internal compass? It's spinning like crazy. Panic, cold and sharp, starts to creep in. This isn't some new fear we've developed. Our ancestors, venturing into vast, untamed forests, faced this as a life or death reality. To get separated from the tribe, to lose your bearings in an environment that couldn't care less if you survived, that was often a death sentence. The forest, a giver of resources, could just as easily become a lush, green tomb. This primal fear is woven deep into the fabric of folklore all over the globe. Countless tales speak of paths that mysteriously twist back upon themselves, of landscapes that almost seem to actively conspire to confuse and mislead. Some traditions talk about genius loci, spirits of place, that guard their domains jealously, deliberately befuddling anyone who intrudes. These spirits aren't always monstrously evil. Sometimes, they're simply the wild, untamed essence of the place itself, pushing back against human encroachment. In many cultures, certain forests were known as places where the veil between worlds was thin, where the normal rules of navigation just didn't apply. You weren't just lost in a physical space. You were lost in a space between spaces, a liminal zone where reality itself felt like it could bend. Think about the word maze. While we mostly associate it with those constructed puzzles, its ancient roots often tie back to spiritual journeys, to trials that test not just your smarts, but your grit and your ability to surrender to a path that defies all logic. The Lost Woods, in this light, feels like a digital descendant of these ancient, terrifying labyrinths. Its repeating pathways aren't a glitch. They're a feature, a coded echo of how it feels to be swallowed by an environment that refuses to be mapped, that turns your own senses against you. The psychological kick of being lost is intense. Disorientation breeds anxiety, which then clouds your judgment, leading to, well, more disorientation. It's a nasty cycle. People who've actually been lost in wilderness areas often describe a cascade of psychological effects. Intense fear, paranoia, even auditory and visual hallucinations as their minds desperately struggle to make sense of the overwhelming patternless input, or sometimes the total lack of it. The forest itself can feel like it's closing in, its silence becoming a roar, its rustling leaves sounding like the whispers of unseen things. That common feeling of being watched. It speaks to a deep-seated instinct that when we're that vulnerable, we are prey. The Kokiri, those childlike folks in Ocarina of Time's forest, are supposedly protected, guided by their fairies and their connection to the Great Deku Tree. They're part of the woods, in tune with its rhythms. Outsiders, though, they don't have that connection. They're vulnerable to the forest's disorienting magic, its inherent trickery. The game tells us that adults who get lost become Stalfos, skeletal warriors, and children become skull kids. This transformation isn't just a random punishment. It's a powerful symbol of being consumed and remade by the wild, of losing your former self to that genius loci. You don't just die in the Lost Woods. You become of the Lost Woods, a permanent, sorrowful part of its landscape. This really clicks with folkloric themes where people who disrespect or misunderstand the wild get absorbed by it, becoming grim warnings for others. The Lost Woods, then, isn't just a puzzle you solve with a specific sequence of turns. It's a psychological trial. Its looping paths and the ever-present threat of transformation are constant reminders of how vulnerable we are when we stripped from our structured, predictable world and tossed into the deep, disorienting unknown. So, that initial terror? It isn't about monsters. It's about the woods themselves, their power to unravel your mind and erase the path home. It's the cold, creeping dread that no matter which way you turn, the forest has already claimed you. The shadowed, imposing forests of Europe? They've been fertile ground for tales of enchantment, peril, and transformation for centuries, offering a rich tapestry of dread that the Lost Woods almost certainly draws from. These weren't just seen as collections of trees. They were living entities, borderlands between our world and the magical, the safe and the downright sinister. Take the Schwarzwald, Germany's Black Forest. The name itself paints a picture of deep, impenetrable darkness, doesn't it? For ages, this huge, densely wooded region has been steeped in legends of curses, witches, and restless spirits. Stories are everywhere about unwary travelers lured off paths by eerie lights or deceptive voices, only to vanish forever or meet some gruesome end. Some tales even speak of hidden, cursed dungeons deep within its confines, where forgotten souls just languish, a chilling parallel to the fate of those who become Stalfos, doomed to be eternal, imprisoned wanderers. Witches were said to gather in its darkest clearings, brewing potent concoctions and weaving spells that could twist fate or corrupt the land itself. These narratives painted the forest as a place where human laws meant nothing and supernatural forces held all the power. The fear wasn't just of getting lost, but of what you might stumble upon, or what might stumble upon you. This idea of the forest as a domain of powerful, often malevolent, magic pops up again and again. The legendary forest of Broceliande, famous in Arthurian legends and located in Brittany, France, is another spot like this. It's described as a realm of pure enchantment, home to figures like the sorceress Morgan Le Fay and the wizard Merlin. Here, time could supposedly distort, and reality itself was flexible. Morgan Le Fay was even said to have created the Valley of No Return, a magical prison for unfaithful knights, a place from which escape was impossible. Sound familiar? Another echo of the Lost Woods' inescapable curse. These forests weren't just passive backdrops in stories. They were active players, their magic shaping destinies and testing the courage of heroes. The concept of transformation within these cursed woods is particularly strong. Just like adults become Stalfos and children skull kids in Hyrule's Lost Woods, European folklore is absolutely packed with tales of people being changed by forest enchantments or curses. Werewolves, men who transform into ravenous beasts under the moon's gaze. are classic forest horrors, embodying that wild, untamed nature lurking just beneath a civilized surface. Fairies, often depicted as beautiful but dangerously unpredictable beings, were notorious for leading mortals astray. They might keep them for years that felt like mere days, or transform them into animals, or even plants, basically absorbing them into the forest's very being. The line between human and non-human was perilously thin in these enchanted groves. To enter such a wood was to risk losing not just your path, but your very form and identity. Even J.R.R. Tolkien's Mirkwood, from The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, pulls heavily from these older Germanic and Norse Mirkwoods, those dark, perilous forests that were much more than just trees. Tolkien's Mirkwood is a place of oppressive shadow, giant spiders, and disorienting paths, where the air itself seems heavy with ancient malice. It's a forest that actively resists anyone trying to enter, a place that can drive people to despair and madness. This literary example shows just how enduring these ancient forest archetypes are. Why were these places cursed? The reasons varied. Sometimes it was the act of a specific entity, a witch, a sorcerer, a nature spirit that had been offended. Other times the curse was just part of the place itself, an ancient magic woven into the soil and trees, often as a way to protect something sacred hidden within. Much like the Lost Woods guards the Master Sword or the Sacred Grove. Anyone who trespassed or showed disrespect to the sanctity of the wood would fall prey to its enchantments. The psychological impact of these European forest myths is huge. They played on the anxieties of communities living right on the edge of vast, untamed wilderness. The forest was a source of vital resources, wood, game, herbs, but it was also the unknown, the other. Stories of cursed forests served as cautionary tales, reinforcing social boundaries and a healthy respect for the untamed world. They gave voice to a sense of vulnerability, the fear that the civilized world was just a small, fragile island in a vast ocean of primal, magical forces. So, when Link steps into the Lost Woods, he's not just entering a cleverly designed game level. He's stepping into a space saturated with these centuries-old European fears. The oppressive atmosphere, that feeling of being watched, the threat of an irreversible, monstrous transformation. All these elements have their roots in the shadowy folklore of the Black Forest, of Broceliand, of countless unnamed, feared woodlands that haunted the European imagination. The rustling leaves of the Lost Woods carry the whispers of werewolves, the laughter of capricious fairies, and the incantations of ancient witches, all reminding the player that some places are best left undisturbed. To enter is to risk becoming another lost soul, another story whispered in hushed tones around the village fire. If we journey eastward in our hunt for cursed forest archetypes, we find ourselves in the deep, ancient woodlands of Slavic folklore. And within them, a powerful and truly enigmatic figure, the Leshy. This spirit, or deity, of the forest isn't some simple monster. He is a complex character who embodies the wood's dual nature, its ability to provide and protect, and its terrifying power to confuse, mislead, and even destroy. The Leshy is, in many ways, the ultimate gatekeeper of the wild, and the parallels with the forces at play in Zelda's Lost Woods are pretty striking. The Leshy is usually described as a male entity, the guardian and master of the forest and everything in it. His appearance? It's changeable. He can be as tall as the highest trees, casting a long shadow over his domain, or he can shrink down to the size of a blade of grass, becoming totally indistinguishable from the undergrowth. He might look like an old man with a long, flowing white beard and glowing green eyes, sometimes with features like hooves or horns. Or he might take the form of an animal, especially a wolf or a bear, creatures he's said to hold under his special protection. He can also mimic familiar voices, calling out to travelers to lure them deeper and deeper into his realm. This shape-shifting ability, this mastery of illusion, immediately brings to mind the disorienting nature of the Lost Woods, where the environment itself seems to actively deceive anyone who enters. One of the Leshy's most notorious traits is his habit of leading travelers astray. He doesn't always do this out of pure malice. Sometimes it's shown as a kind of mischievous play, a test, or even a way to protect the sanctity of his woods from unwelcome visitors. He might confuse paths, make familiar landmarks vanish, or cause a disorienting fog to roll in. All tactics that players of the Lost Woods will find chillingly familiar. Those who displease the Leshy, maybe by hunting too much, cutting down sacred trees without permission, or just generally disrespecting the forest, are particularly vulnerable to his tricks. They might find themselves wandering in circles for hours, days, or even permanently, slowly giving in to exhaustion, fear, and the elements. This is a direct parallel to the fate of outsiders in the Lost Woods, who, if they stray from the correct, often hidden, path, are constantly returned to the entrance, trapped in that frustrating and demoralizing loop. The consequences of running into an angered Leshy could be severe. While sometimes he might just play tricks, other tales paint him as a much more dangerous force, capable of causing people to become hopelessly lost, driven to madness, or even spirited away, never to be seen again. There are accounts of the Leshy claiming cursed people or those who died unnatural deaths within his domain. He might even abduct children, sometimes swapping them with his own offspring, a changeling concept found in many cultures, but given a distinctly forest-wide twist here. This idea of being taken or transformed by the forest spirit really resonates with the Lost Woods curse, where children become skull kids, effectively becoming children of the forest in a very literal and terrifying way. But the Leshy isn't purely evil. He's also a protector of the forest and its creatures. Hunters, woodsmen, and herdsmen who showed respect, made the right offerings, like bread and salt, or followed forest etiquette might find favor with him. He might guide a lost but respectful traveler to safety, ensure a good hunt for someone deserving, or protect livestock that grazed near his woods. This duality is key. The Leshy embodies the wild's impartial justice. The forest gives, but it also takes. It offers sanctuary, but it demands respect. This protective side mirrors the belief that the Lost Woods curse is a safeguard, a way to protect sacred relics like the Master Sword, and the sacred forest meadow from those who are unworthy or just plain malicious. The curse, like the Leshy's trickery, serves to filter out those who don't belong, allowing only the chosen hero, or those who understand the forest's secrets, to pass. To appease the Leshy, or to escape his disorienting tricks if you found yourself lost, people sometimes use certain rituals. Turning your clothes inside out, putting your shoes on the wrong feet, or reciting specific charms were all believed to confuse the Leshy or break his enchantment. This suggests a belief in a kind of countermagic, a way to navigate the supernatural rules of the forest. While Link doesn't typically resort to changing his tunic around, the idea of needing a specific key, whether it's a song, a sequence of movements, or the guidance of a forest spirit like Saria or a Kokiri fairy, to safely navigate the Lost Woods shares this concept of needing specialized knowledge to overcome the forest's built-in defenses. The Leshy, therefore, represents a powerful folkloric blueprint for the kind of intelligence and agency that seems to fill the Lost Woods. It's not just a random collection of trees and fog. There feels like there's an intent behind its bewildering nature. The Slavic tales of the Leshy provide a narrative framework for a forest that actively watches, judges, and reacts to those who dare to enter its depths. It's a place that demands more than just a good sense of direction. It demands an understanding of its ancient, unwritten laws. Fail to show respect, fail to understand its nature, and just like those who fall foul of the Leshy, you risk becoming another lost soul, another whisper in the endless, rustling expanse of the cursed woods. The ancient Celtic lands, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, Brittany, they're just steeped in a profound and often unsettling relationship with the natural world, especially their dense, misty forests. These weren't seen as just physical locations, but as liminal spaces, thresholds to the other world, the realm of the Fae, the Owls Sea, or people of the mounds. To step into a forest like that was to risk crossing a boundary into a land where time flowed differently, where human rules were totally meaningless, and where encounters with its inhabitants could lead to enchantment madness or a change you could never come back from. The echoes of these beliefs, they resonate deeply within the mysterious and perilous atmosphere of Zelda's Lost Woods. Celtic folklore paints the otherworld not as some distant heaven or hell, but as a parallel dimension existing right alongside our own. It was often accessible through natural features like ancient burial mounds, called siddhi, caves, lakes, and, most importantly for us, deep, old-growth forests. These forests were seen as intrinsically magical, places where the veil between worlds was particularly thin. You could stumble into a fey revel, a glittering feast under the moon, or be drawn into a siddhi mound by enchanting music, only to find out that what felt like a single night of partying was actually decades, or even centuries, in the mortal world. This distortion of time is a classic sign of fey encounters and is subtly mirrored in the timeless, ageless quality of places like the Lost Woods and its inhabitants, the Kokiri, who are eternally children. The Fae themselves are complex figures, a far cry from the tiny, friendly sprites of later Victorian imagination. In Celtic lore, they are powerful, often amoral beings, with their own complicated societies and codes of conduct. They could be beautiful and alluring, sure, but also incredibly dangerous and unpredictable. An unintended insult, a broken promise, or simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time could bring down their wrath or unwanted attention. They were known to lure mortals into their realm for all sorts of reasons, sometimes for amusement, sometimes for companionship, sometimes for more sinister purposes like taking a mortal spouse, or in darker tales as a kind of tithe to hell. The haunting melodies often associated with Fey lands, melodies that could charm and ensnare the unwary, are definitely reminiscent of Seria's song in Ocarina of Time, a tune intrinsically linked to the Lost Woods guiding Link, but also highlighting the forest's otherworldly, not quite human nature. Transformation is a huge theme in Celtic Fey lore, much like it's central to the curse of the Lost Woods. Mortals who spent too long in the otherworld, ate Fey food, or fell under a Fey enchantment could find themselves changed. They might lose all their memories of the mortal world, become Fey themselves, or even be transformed into animals or inanimate objects, basically absorbed into the very essence of the enchanted domain. There are tales of people who, after returning from the otherworld, crumbled to dust, all those stolen years catching up with them in an instant. This really speaks to the profound and often irreversible impact of venturing into these magical, perilous territories. The fate of adults becoming Stalfos and children becoming Skull Kids in the Lost Woods is a stark reflection of this transformative, consuming power of an enchanted, Fey-haunted space. They are, in essence, claimed by the forest, their human identities completely overwritten. The labyrinthine nature of the Lost Woods also finds strong parallels in Celtic traditions. The paths in Fey-controlled forests were often described as deliberately misleading, designed to confuse. You could walk for miles and find yourself right back where you started, or a familiar path could simply vanish into thin air. This wasn't just natural disorientation. It was active enchantment, the forest itself, under Fey influence, playing tricks on your mind and senses. The mists that often shroud these legendary Celtic forests, and indeed, the Lost Woods, aren't just weather. They're magical veils, obscuring vision, distorting sound, and adding to that feeling of being totally cut off from the ordinary world. What's more, these enchanted forests were often seen as guardians of sacred sites or treasures, much like the Lost Woods protects the Master Sword and the sacred forest meadow. Only those with specific knowledge, a rightful claim, or the help of a friendly Fey being could hope to navigate these protected areas successfully. The Kokiri, with their attendant fairies and their connection to the Great Deku Tree, a figure that really reminds you of sacred trees or green man archetypes in Celtic belief, act as initiates and guides. They're immune to the forest's disorienting powers that plague outsiders. Link, often aided by such figures or by a magical artifact, is the hero who can pierce the illusions. The reverence and fear given to these places in Celtic folklore highlight a deep understanding of the wild as a potent, sentient force. The woods weren't empty. They were alive with beings whose power and motivations were often way beyond human comprehension. To enter them unprepared or with bad intentions was to court disaster. The Lost Woods, with its shifting paths, its ethereal music, its childlike guardians, and its transformative curse, feels like a direct digital descendant of these mist-shrouded, Fey-haunted forests of Celtic antiquity. It captures that same sense of stepping out of the mundane and into a world operating under entirely different, ancient rules. A world that is beautiful, terrifying, and utterly indifferent to those who can't understand its ways. Those who get lost aren't just geographically misplaced. They are lost to another realm, another state of being, forever changed by their trespass into the domain of the Fae. Let's shift our gaze eastward, to the islands of Japan, which offer a rich and ancient tapestry of beliefs surrounding forests, spirits, and the mysterious disappearances of those who venture too deep among the trees. Japanese Shinto and Buddhist traditions, along with a vibrant body of folklore, imbue natural landscapes, especially old-growth forests and mountains, with profound spiritual significance. These places are often considered home to kami, gods or spirits, and yokai, supernatural monsters, spirits, and demons, and their sanctity can be both a source of power and a wellspring of peril. The concept of kamikakushi, or being spirited away by gods or spirits, is particularly resonant with the curse of the Lost Woods. One of the most internationally recognized, though rather somber, examples of a forest with a powerful, unsettling reputation in Japan is Aokigahara Jukai, the Sea of Trees, located at the base of Mount Fuji. Its dense, sprawling nature, porous volcanic rock that absorbs sound, and historical associations have all contributed to its eerie atmosphere. Folklore speaks of Yurei, ghosts, haunting Aokigahara, and it has an unfortunate modern association with suicide. While the reasons for its modern reputation are complex, that underlying sense of a forest that can swallow individuals, a place of profound isolation and sorrow, touches upon the same primal fears that the Lost Woods exploits. The very density and sound-absorbing qualities of Aokigahara create a natural sense of disorientation, making it incredibly easy to get lost, a feature that definitely mirrors the gameplay mechanic of the Lost Woods. Beyond specific locations, Japanese folklore is absolutely teeming with a vast bestiary of yokai that inhabit forests. Some, like certain kodama, tree spirits, can be relatively benign or even protective if the forest is respected. The sound of a tree falling when no one is near, or strange echoes, might be attributed to them. However, many other forest-dwelling yokai are far more dangerous. Tengu, those bird-like mountain and forest goblins, are known for their trickery, their martial prowess, and, significantly for us, for causing kamikakushi, spiriting away humans, especially children or arrogant priests. Those taken by Tengu might return bewildered and changed, or they might never return at all. That concept of kamikakushi is pretty central to understanding the Japanese folkloric parallels to the Lost Woods. It describes the sudden, inexplicable disappearance of a person attributed to the actions of an unseen kami or yokai. Sometimes, those who were spirited away might reappear days, months, or even years later, often with no memory of what happened or having experienced time very differently. In other, more tragic cases, they're never seen again, or are found deceased under mysterious circumstances. This notion of being taken, hidden, or claimed by supernatural entities residing in wild, untamed places is a direct echo of what happens to those who become lost in Hyrule's cursed woods. They don't just wander off. They are, in effect, spirited away by the forest's magic, transformed into skull kids or stalfos, becoming permanent, altered residents of that mystical domain. The reverence for nature in Shinto belief also plays a big role here. Ancient trees, shinboku, groves, and mountains are often considered sacred, inhabited by kami. While this sacredness can be a source of blessing and protection, it also implies that such places are not to be messed with. Disrespecting a sacred grove, polluting it, or entering it with impure intentions could invite misfortune or the wrath of its guardian spirits. The Lost Woods, as a protector of the Master Sword and the sacred forest meadow, clearly functions as a sacred, guarded space. Its curse acts as a powerful deterrent, filtering out the unworthy and preserving its sanctity, much like the unseen guardians of a Shinto sacred site might repel those who approach with a lack of reverence. And the psychological aspect of Japanese forest folklore is potent. The dense, often dark, and silent forests can evoke a real sense of isolation and unease. Tales of yokai and kamikakushi can be seen as ways to articulate these anxieties, to give form to the unknown dangers that might lurk just beyond the village edge. The fear isn't just of wild animals, but of supernatural forces that operate by rules completely alien to human understanding. When Link navigates the confusing paths of the Lost Woods, listening for the guiding tune of Saria's song, he is, in a sense, trying to find the correct ritual or path that will appease the forest's unseen guardians and allow him safe passage, hopefully avoiding that fate of being spirited away. The transformation into Skull Kids, often depicted playing flutes and possessing a mischievous, somewhat sorrowful nature, has a particular resonance. These beings seem to be children who have been fully assimilated into the forest's mysterious ecosystem, becoming almost like nature spirits themselves, no longer truly human, but not entirely monstrous either. They embody the tragic consequence of being lost, of being hidden by the gods, in a way that forever alters their existence. The Japanese perspective offers this nuanced view where the forest is alive with a whole spectrum of spirits, from the potentially helpful to the dangerously deceptive. The curse of the Lost Woods, seen through this lens, isn't just a passive enchantment. It's the active work of a sentient environment, a place that jealously guards its secrets and will readily absorb or transform those who fail to navigate its spiritual, as well as physical, complexities. The whispers among the trees in Hyrule are the echoes of yokai, the sorrowful cries of those spirited away by kamikakushi, a constant reminder that the forest has its own ancient, powerful magic. So, beyond all the specific cultural myths and folkloric creatures, the terror of the Lost Woods, and really, all cursed forests in our stories, taps into something even more fundamental: the innate psychological fears that forests can stir up in the human mind. These are primal anxieties, practically wired into our collective unconscious from a time when the forest wasn't a place for a nice weekend hike, but a vast, often hostile, unknown that lay just beyond the flickering safety of the campfire. Understanding these deep-seated fears helps explain why the Lost Woods feels so genuinely unsettling, regardless of its specific in-game lore. One of the most basic fears is simply the fear of the unknown. Forests, especially dense, old-growth ones, are inherently places where you can't see very far. The canopy blocks out light, creating deep shadows and a kind of perpetual twilight even during the day. The undergrowth can hide anything: predators, pitfalls, or just the way forward. Our brains are pattern-seeking machines, constantly trying to assess our environment for threats and opportunities. In a forest, the usual visual cues are diminished, and the environment can feel chaotic and unpredictable. This lack of clear information can seriously trigger anxiety, as our ancient survival instincts scream at us that what we can't see can hurt us. The mists and confusing layouts of the Lost Woods amplify this to an extreme degree, creating a perfect storm of sensory deprivation and gnawing uncertainty. Then there's the fear of being prey. For a huge chunk of human history, we weren't exactly the top dogs in every environment. Deep forests were the domain of creatures far better adapted to that world: wolves, bears, big cats. That rustling in the undergrowth, the snap of a twig, the unseen movement glimpsed from the corner of your eye. These could all signal deadly danger. Our senses become hyper-alert, a state that, while once crucial for survival, can become overwhelming and lead to paranoia when it's sustained. The Lost Woods, with its unseen curse and the eventual appearance of monsters like Stalfos, plays directly on this fear of hidden threats that can emerge at any moment. Solitude and silence, or conversely, unfamiliar sounds, also pile onto forest-induced anxiety. While some people find peace in the quiet of nature, for others, the profound silence of a deep forest can be unnerving, really highlighting one's isolation and vulnerability. On the other hand, the natural sounds of the forest, the hoot of an owl, the cry of an unseen animal, the creak of branches, the whisper of wind through leaves, can be easily misinterpreted by a frightened mind as something far more sinister. The Lost Woods often features a distinctive, sometimes eerie, soundtrack which, rather than soothing, can actually enhance the sense of being in an alien and potentially hostile environment. Even Seria's song, while a guide, has an otherworldly quality that keeps reminding you that you are definitely not in a normal place. The very structure of a forest can be incredibly disorienting. That seemingly endless repetition of trees, the lack of distinct landmarks, and the way paths can twist and turn can easily lead to a complete loss of bearings. This spatial disorientation can be profoundly psychologically disturbing, leading to feelings of helplessness and sheer panic. The core mechanic of the Lost Woods, being magically zapped back to the start if you make a wrong turn, is a fantastical exaggeration of this very real experience, frustrating the player and inducing a powerful sense of powerlessness against the forest's will. Folklore itself often amplifies these inherent psychological triggers. Stories of witches, spirits, and monsters lurking in the woods give a name and a face to these otherwise formless anxieties. They transform a general sense of unease into a specific, narrativized threat. The tale of children becoming skull kids or adults becoming stalfos is far more terrifying than just getting lost and dying. It adds a layer of supernatural horror, a transformation into something other, which taps into deep fears of losing one's identity and humanity. As Stephen King once pointed out, we make up horrors to help us cope with real ones, and forest horror stories often articulate our anxieties about the savage, untamed parts of nature and, perhaps, the untamed parts of ourselves. The forest can also be a symbol of the unconscious mind. As Carl Jung theorized, the forest in fairy tales and myths can represent the perilous aspects of the unconscious, its tendency to devour or obscure the reason. To venture into the forest is to venture into the unknown territories of one's own psyche. Getting lost can symbolize a psychological crisis, a loss of self. The transformations in the Lost Woods can even be read metaphorically as the disintegration of the ego when confronted with overwhelming, disorienting forces. So, when we experience that unsettling atmosphere of the Lost Woods, we're reacting not just to the game's narrative or its mechanics, but to a deep well of primal and psychological triggers. The darkness, the hidden threats, the disorientation, the solitude, and the threat of transformation all resonate with ancient fears that are part of our human heritage. Storytellers, from ancient mythmakers to modern game designers, really understand this. They use the forest as a canvas upon which to paint our deepest anxieties, making locations like the Lost Woods so incredibly effective, not just as a challenge, but as a truly haunting experience that stays with us long after we've turned off the console. The curse isn't just in the code, it's in our own psychology. We've journeyed through labyrinthine paths of code and crossed the shadowed borders of ancient folklore. We've listened to the whispers of European witches and the deceptive calls of the Slavic Leshy. We've glimpsed the shimmering veils of Celtic Fey realms and felt the chilling touch of Japanese kamikakushi. And in every rustle of those digital leaves, in every haunting melody, we find echoes of these ancient human fears, all woven together to create the inescapable curse of Zelda's Lost Woods. So, why does no one escape alive, or at least unchanged? The answer isn't in a single curse, but in a perfect storm of them, a confluence of mythological dread and psychological triggers that the Lost Woods masterfully bottles up. That inescapable maze, the core mechanic that defines the Lost Woods, is the digital version of humanity's primal fear of being lost. It's the terrifying disorientation we find in tales of genius loci actively misleading travelers, the tricks of the Leshy who turns paths back upon themselves, and the bewildering enchantments of fake-controlled forests where reality itself seems to warp. To be trapped in this loop is to face the ancient horror of the labyrinth, not just a physical prison, but a psychological one that chips away at hope and sanity. And the horrifying transformations, children into skull kids, adults into stalfos, these are the pixelated embodiment of ancient beliefs in metamorphosis and being consumed by the wild. This is the dark magic of European tales, where witches curse their victims into monstrous forms, and fey spirits absorb mortals into their timeless, inhuman world. It's that deep fear of losing your identity, of being remade by an ancient, uncaring power, a theme starkly present in stories where the forest doesn't just kill, but claims and changes its victims. This isn't mere death. It's a terrifying alteration of your very being, a permanent inscription into the forest's grim ledger. The protective nature of the curse, safeguarding sacred relics like the Master Sword, directly mirrors the folkloric concept of sacred groves and hidden treasures guarded by powerful spirits or ancient enchantments. The Leshy protects his domain from the disrespectful. Celtic Fae guard their secret realms. Shinto Kami inhabits sacred trees, repelling the impure. The Lost Woods curse, seen this way, is the vigilant guardian, ensuring only the worthy, the destined, or those who understand its secret language can ever penetrate its depths. For everyone else, it's a wall of illusion and despair. And underpinning all of this is the profound psychological impact. The Lost Woods preys on our innate fear of the unknown, the dark, the unseen predator, and the disorienting power of solitude in an untamed environment. It's a distillation of what made forests so terrifying to our ancestors. Not just the physical dangers, but the mental toll of being exposed, vulnerable, and completely cut off from the familiar. Why no one escapes alive, therefore, is answered by this potent synthesis. You don't escape because the woods are designed by these ancient fears to hold you. You become a Stalfos or a Skull Kid not merely due to a line of code, but because you succumb to the archetypal fate of the unwary traveler in countless myths. You've been consumed, transformed, and made a permanent part of the terrifying legend. The death here is often a death of self, of one's previous identity, becoming a ghost, a monster, a spirit bound forever to the place of their undoing. The Lost Woods is a testament to the enduring power of these folkloric and psychological archetypes. It's a place where the digital and the mythological blur, creating an experience that feels far older and more significant than its lines of code might suggest. It is a cursed space because it's built upon the cursed spaces of our collective imagination, those shadowy forests that have lurked at the edges of human consciousness for millennia, whispering warnings about the dangers of straying too far from the known path. The true curse, then, is the weight of all these ancient stories, pressing in on the player, reminding them that some mysteries are best left undisturbed, and some forests are, indeed, inescapable. Our journey through the shadowed paths of myth and the pixelated corridors of Hyrule has shown us something pretty profound, hasn't it? The Lost Woods is far more than just a collection of trees and code. It stands as a potent digital monument to an ancient, deeply human anxiety, the terror and the strange allure of the cursed forest. Its looping paths, its transformative curse, its eerie, almost sentient atmosphere. These aren't new inventions. They're echoes of stories whispered around hearths for millennia, warnings etched into our collective unconscious by cultures that lived in intimate, and often fearful, closeness to the vast, untamed wilderness. The cursed forest isn't just some random trope. It's a powerful archetype, a kind of narrative shorthand that taps into a deep reservoir of shared anxieties and cultural memories. Its endurance, from ancient oral traditions all the way to the interactive landscapes of modern video games, really speaks to its fundamental power. In The Legend of Zelda, The Lost Woods is more than just a tough level or a plot device to hide the Master Sword. It becomes a rite of passage for Link, and through him, for us, the players. Successfully navigating its deceptive paths and overcoming its oppressive atmosphere is a testament to courage, wisdom, and often a reliance on a connection to something mystical, whether it's Saria's song, the guidance of a fairy, or some innate heroic intuition. It embodies the hero's journey into the unknown, a descent into a symbolic underworld from which you either emerge transformed or you don't emerge at all. Game designers, much like the storytellers of old, use these archetypes with incredible skill. They understand that the fear of getting lost, the dread of transformation, the unease of an environment that seems alive and hostile, these are universal experiences. By coding these fears into the gameplay, into the visual design, the soundscape, and the lore, they create locations that resonate on a level far deeper than simple entertainment. The Lost Woods is memorable precisely because it feels familiar even in its strangeness. It activates those ancient neural pathways that once warned our ancestors about the dangers lurking in the deep, dark woods. The persistence of these cursed forest themes across so many different cultures, from the Leshy of Slavic lands to the fey-haunted groves of Celtic regions, from the witch-filled black forest of Germany to the spirit-inhabited forests of Japan, highlights a universal human attempt to make sense of the untamed world. Forests were, for so much of human history, vast, powerful, and essential for survival, yet also inherently dangerous and mysterious. These stories served as maps of meaning, ways to navigate not just the physical terrain, but the psychological and spiritual landscape it represented. They explained the inexplicable, cautioned against recklessness, and reinforced a deep respect for the natural world's awesome power. The beauty of the Lost Woods design is how it translates these ancient narrative functions into an interactive experience. You don't just hear about the curse, you experience it directly through the gameplay loops and the unsettling atmosphere. You feel the frustration of disorientation, the subtle dread of the unknown, and the immense relief of finally finding the true path. This active participation makes the archetype even more impactful. So, The Lost Woods isn't merely inspired by folklore. It becomes a piece of modern folklore itself, a digital iteration of an age-old story. It reminds us that even in our technologically advanced world, those primal fears and wonders associated with wild, untamed places still hold a powerful sway over our imaginations. The storyteller's art, whether it's inscribed on ancient scrolls or coded into a game cartridge, continues to explore these liminal spaces because it's in these shadowy, uncertain realms that we often learn the most about courage, resilience, and the enduring human spirit. The curse of the Lost Woods, ensuring no one escapes alive or unchanged, is a tapestry woven from German witches' hexes, the disorienting magic of the Slavic Leshy, the timeless enchantments of Celtic fey realms, and the Japanese fear of being spirited away by yokai, all amplified by the innate psychological discomfort we feel when faced with the unknown. The Lost Woods endures in our gaming memories not just because it's a clever puzzle, but because it speaks to something primal within us. It's a testament to how effectively the legend of Zelda taps into this universal wellspring of story, crafting an experience that feels both fantastical and deeply, unsettlingly familiar. The shadows of these ancient forests still stretch long into our modern world, their whispers carried on the digital wind. And as we turn off our consoles, the question lingers, just as it did for our ancestors staring into the firelight. What other locations in our vast, imaginative worlds draw their power from these timeless, terrifying truths? What other game locations do you think have terrifying real-world origins? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to see more deep dives into the lore and legends behind your favorite games, to uncover the hidden stories that shape the worlds we love to explore, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more adventures into the unknown. Until next time, tread carefully when you venture off the beaten path. You never know what ancient curses might be waiting.